you learn how much of an impact you can have on young players' lives, not just the baseball piece, right? And from that standpoint, it was more, I'm going to invest off the field more than I am in terms of baseball related stuff, right? Unfortunately, we live in a we, me type environment. It's rankings, and you have players that are chasing metrics, and that team component is kind of lost right now. So trying to get that back, I think, is my main focus right now.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations. I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Corey Eckstein, who's the current president of the Ontario Blue Jays, which is one of the top amateur baseball elite programs in Canada. Welcome to the show, Corey.
Appreciate you having me, Joe. I didn't anticipate you giving me that opportunity to come speak to you, so happy to be here.
Oh, sure. Of course, man. I mean, we share a lot of stories together. When we were younger, we met first in, I would say, 2011.
That sounds right. Yeah.
We were coaching. We both got invited to coach the junior national team. I believe that was your guest coach before.
I was, yeah. I had two guest opportunities.
And then before that, your tie-in with Baseball Canada was as a player junior national team back in 2003,
a long time
So
ago.
You're with Tassoni on the
in
junior
high school,
national
yeah, growing up,
okay.
all through high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tassoni's one of our hometown heroes. Mm-hmm. So you ended up coaching the junior national team when you're
23.
23. So you're a really young guy who just got out of playing career.
Yeah, I still joke about it all the time. I still don't know what Greg was thinking hiring me at 23, but obviously grateful for those opportunities. Hanging out with guys like Ducey, yourself, and Quantrill. Like that first time walking in the clubhouse with those guys was like, what am I doing here?
Right.
But they made me feel welcome, and grateful for that experience for sure.
So let's talk about, I guess, your coaching career and how you ended up coaching at such a young age. Sure. Because most people think of, coaches as a little older. Mm-hmm. You get into coaching when, I guess, you're in your 40s, or that's what people think.
Sure. No, I started at 19. Yeah, I kind of got thrown into it. Grew up in Abbotsford, small farm town in British Columbia. I was born in Montreal. Moved out to BC when I was 5. My sister actually was born with dwarfism, and my family kind of uprooted and ended up in a small farm town, like I said, and grew up with the Abbotsford Angels organization to start, and then transferred over to the BC Premier League, which is the Abbotsford Cardinals program. Got a chance to play there, and from there got a chance to play with Baseball BC and Baseball Canada, and got an opportunity in grade 12 finally to play for Greg. That was kind of the experience that I had hoped to aspire to get to, and finally got there. And didn't have many offers out of high school, to be honest with you. Had a lot of small junior colleges, and ended up going to a small JUCO in Texas, Vernon College. Played for Coach Lallman there, and had Tommy John my first year as a freshman. And I remember coming back and finding out Christmas Eve that I was going to get under the knife, and kind of went through that point in time in life where it was, what am I going to do next? At that point in time, Tommy John was still kind of relatively new, and going through that process, I didn't have all the support around me that I think I needed to get through it. During that time, I remember starting doing lessons outside at local parks with kids in my hometown with a sling on my arm, and that's kind of where it started, and kind of just went head over heels. Baseball BC, NCCP, all that type of stuff, and for whatever reason, Greg gave me a chance at 23, and got a chance to do, I think, 4 or 5 years with him in a row. So
yeah. No, we got to travel the world. We've been to Italy, Korea, Australia, Taiwan, Colombia, Dominican, Cuba.
All over the place in a short time frame.
All over the place, yeah. And I remember we were talking about this before, but you don't know this, but you actually helped me a lot settle in as a coach, because you've been coaching in the previous years. Sure. Before that. Yeah. Before I was still a player when I started coaching the junior national team.
It's tough from going player mode to coach mode.
Oh, it's crazy. The speed of the game is totally different. Sure. The way you perceive it, and especially at third base, mm-hmm. I was put coaching third base, and I was, not confident in myself. Yeah. So I remember I was leaning onto you to kind of give me pointers to
slow the game down, angles.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah,
so I always appreciated that. But that was, during that time when, I met you for the first time in 2011. And man, we have a lot of stories, obviously. Like, I mean, we were young, we were traveling, mm-hmm. and this was all new to us. But how was your experience overall, with that junior national team?
I mean, it's something I'll remember for the rest of my career, and hopefully I get a chance to do it again at some point. I mean, just traveling across the globe, first and foremost, having a chance to be around good coaches and good players, and being able to watch those guys' career kind of flourish over the next, over their high school career was quite something for me to watch from afar, for sure.
Right. And what would you say in terms of that experience? How has that helped you to who you are today in terms of the way you see things, your perspective in development, just as a whole? How's that whole experience?
Yeah, I think being around the highest level of player gives you the perspective that you need and want, right? Like going back and having conversations with players, not just at the elite level, but the grassroots level as well, and be able to speak to that and what it looks like on the other side and the style of play of other countries and things like that, right? So, yeah, forever grateful for those opportunities to get involved at a young age, and quite frankly, it opened up a lot of other doors for me in my career. That led to the scouting piece, and I had my hands in a lot of different things at that time in my career. Right. But I can honestly say that experience with Baseball Canada really allowed me to flourish and experience other things.
Right. So you mentioned scouting too. So I know you were a scout for the Kansas City Royals. Correct. And are you currently scouting still, or?
No. So I got furloughed right when COVID hit, right before the move out here. Okay. I was kind of leaning towards stepping aside from that. It was more of a part-time role. Right. At that point in time in my life, I was running the Abbotsford Cardinals. I was doing the University of Fraser Valley. Baseball BC, JNT. There was a lot going on, right? So I was looking to scale back my focus a little bit. It was good to have my hands in so many things from a perspective standpoint, but it was almost too much at that point in time.
Right.
Yeah.
So in terms of that experience in scouting, because a lot of people don't understand what scouts see.
Sure.
They usually performance-based, especially at the youth level. Sure. It's like, what does it take for my kid to be seen? That's the common question. It's like, well, I don't really have an answer, but from your perspective, what would you say is that answer?
For me, I would go to the park hoping that players would actually fail. And as crazy as that sounds, who the players are for the most part when you go to the yard, and being around with the national team, you're always around those type of players, right? But for me, looking for the diamond in the rough first and foremost, right? And going to the yard, watching how they respond to failure. That was the biggest thing for me. That's right? And watching players and understanding whether they truly love the game of baseball or not, because there is a difference, right? There's guys that love it and there's guys that don't. And I go back I'll use Miles, for instance, right? I had so many phone calls with him leading up to the draft and guys asking me, does he really love baseball? And I said, yeah, he does. He just carries himself a little bit differently, right? He's got two older brothers, a lot of pressure on his shoulders, right? But he was a prime example for me, watching him play. Yes, sometimes it was kind of monotone and just kind of chill, right? But he cared. He sure as hell cared. No, different. You could say that for sure. So, but yeah, that's just a prime example of kind of what I would go to the yard hoping and expecting any given day.
And which is total opposite of what players actually think when you say
it's a topic
failure.
Of conversation all the time with these guys, right? For sure.
Because we're looking for responses, how somebody deals with the adversity, how they carry themselves. Those are all important things. And it's not saying that, you always have to be perfect at that moment, because young kids don't understand that. It's an evolution. Sure. And eventually, you figure that out as you go, that hey, they weren't even looking at certain things in the first place. It was the little stuff that aren't necessarily tangible that make the world of a difference, right? And a lot of it has to do with character check. A lot of it has to do with all those things that parents and kids don't really see, right? So
no, you're bang on. I mean, my favorite place to hang out was behind the dugout, or hidden in left field, and I'd show up early and kind of watch how guys go about their business pregame and things like that, right? Those intangibles are more important for me, right? So yeah. So
let's move into coaching philosophies, because I know through your experience, you've coached at every level. As a player, you've played. You've been a scout. Now you're the president of the Ontario Blue Jays. What are some of the main philosophies that you carry with you and I'm sure they've changed over the years, but basically the current version of Corey Eckstein right now, what would you say is your kind of philosophy of baseball coaching / development?
Man, I think it has evolved over the years. Just speaking on my experience, I remember as a young coach, for me going through that, it was it was kind of selfish at that point in time. It was all about me. It was all about the wins and losses. Then you go through a process of you learn how much of an impact you can have on young players' lives, not just the baseball piece, right? And, I had a player in grade 11, I'll never forget it, called me at 2 o'clock in the morning one night, and his friend tried to commit suicide.
Oh, shoot.
And that was a game changer for me in terms of like what really matters. You know what I mean? I'm competitive. I hate losing, right? But from that standpoint, it was more I'm going to invest off the field more than I am in terms of baseball related stuff, right? You know, and now the game is kind of changed so much in terms of, unfortunately, we live in a we, me type environment. You know, it's, you know, rankings, and you have players that are chasing metrics, and that team component is kind of lost right now. And that's just, you know, social media is great, but it also has something to do with some of that stuff as well, in my opinion. You know, so trying to get that back, I think, is my main focus right now. The team component for sure.
Right. So let's go to coaching. You have coaching on one side, and then now it's more of a leadership role where
it's been a challenge, man. It's a challenge.
How so?
I moved here to do baseball, and I feel like I've sat in an office for the past 4.5 years, right? It's been a challenge. I've enjoyed that transition, but I miss feeling like a baseball coach. There's days where it's like I'm going to practice at 7 after being in the office for 8 hours, and it's like I don't feel as energized as I want to. You figure it out, obviously.
Right. You get your fix in.
Oh, for sure. I think
downstairs.
You know, being in that leadership now role, being consistent across the board is super important for me. Making sure that not just my staff, but my players and families can trust me. If I don't have any trust, I have nothing, quite frankly, right? You know, and being accessible and being able to delegate and give things away to, you know, I got guys that I trust. Connor Morrow, you know, our player development side. Like,
awesome guy.
I came here to do that piece, and once I got around him and realized how knowledgeable he is in certain areas, it was easy for me to pass that up, right? So definitely being able to delegate is been a big piece for me. I like to have my hands in everything, but also putting my trust in others and empowering other people to just do their jobs, quite frankly, right? Like, I don't want my staff feeling as though they have to come to me about everything, right? That's not leadership to me. I want them to feel comfortable in their skin and go and execute when needed.
I want to talk about baseball development in general. And specifically, we could talk about baseball in Canada because we're both obviously local here in Toronto. But for me, one big thing that I'm realizing in development is, you know, technology has always been, you know, the front runner in everything we do, and rightfully so. Like every time, even in society, if there's a new phone or, you know,
you want it.
You want it, and you're just updated, right?
Yeah.
So I get why we have that same tendency when it comes to baseball development, because we have all these tools to now track results.
Sure.
But over the past, I'd say 10 years or so, ever since technology has been, you know, more on the forefront, I feel like we as a whole have been trying to teach results and get those results or achieve those results
as fast as possible.
Right.
Yes.
When that's not the case, because there's a whole process of how you eventually get there. Right. And I think Justin Verlander said it perfectly. Like, he didn't really throw hard until he was really in college.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't like you could see
it though. You could see it coming, right? It's
It's just
a matter projection. It's just a matter of time for some.
Right, and everybody's different. Yeah. Like, and I was talking to you earlier about this. It's like you have, you know, guys that develop when they're 16. I was a guy who developed really young.
Sure.
Right. Like, I was mature enough to play really as a young player. But some might take
late bloomers. Those are my favorite type of players.
29,
right?
30, even you see guys in the big leagues. Yeah. Right. I say that I use Connor Panis as the perfect example. I think he's peaking right now. He's in Mexico right now, and he's playing with big leaguers, and he's holding his own.
Fence, 31, 32, somewhere around
there. 31 years old. So it's like development happens different for everyone, and we can't really use a cookie cutter approach. But there are some principles and fundamentals, I guess, that, you know, we'd like to instill in our youth. What would you say kind of like is the state of that development that you see? That was just kind of like my
Yeah, I think it's a
perspective,
scary world we're living in right now. I mean, I'm showing up to my son who's just turned 10, and we got coaches with radar guns behind home plate. Like that. That's a scary world we're living in, right? Like, obviously, numbers speak. They grab college recruiters' attention. I understand that, right? But at the end of the day, college coaches, they need to win. Right? If they don't win, that first and foremost, right? And team concepts and things like that, lost art, like we talked about earlier, like that's just not talked about enough, in my opinion. And I don't think we spend enough time on fields up here in Canada, unfortunately. But back to the technology piece, I think there's a lot of good in some of the stuff that is out there now.
Sure.
I think it comes down to coaches being able to educate themselves on how to use it properly. We use Pulse, which is an arm sensor basically on all our pitchers every time they come in the building, and it might be a pain in the ass to put it on, but our guys do a really good job, and we're tracking workloads and making sure that these guys aren't ramping up to throw 100 pitches in February. That's ridiculous, right? So, and you're seeing that over and over and over again, usually across the line and sometimes up here too, just abuse, right? So yes, the radar gun is important, but it's not the be-all, end-all for sure, and neither is exit velocity and all the other stuff.
Well, I think that comes with the territory of how it's marketed at the highest level, which is Major League Baseball, right? And I think that's the whole point. We've been kind of preaching spin, velo, whatever the metrics that apply to the highest level of baseball.
And I get it though, right? Because you have 88 back in the day is now 92, right? And
it's the evolution of the game.
No, for sure it is, right?
And it's moving in the right direction, in my opinion. Right? Obviously, there's going to be pros and cons to everything, right? So, and one thing, and I'm the same way. I'm a true believer in technology. I think technology is a great tool that we can use to help us. But I think the perspective on it has to change, because maybe someone with baseball experience will understand this, but the people that are actually teaching our kids at the youth level might not know this, right? So they go what they see on social media, and with social media, it's not all great. There's some poison out there, some great stuff as well.
You can fool a lot of people on social media too,
100%.
right? Like, okay, you touch 90, but is it on the top side 90, or are you sitting there, right? Like it's just the world we're living in right now. And my biggest frustration is you have players now that are like choosing to go and train in these development centers and foregoing actually competing with their team. Like that happens these days, right? And that's concerning to me, right? So
I mean that's the whole industry, even in the U.S., right? You're talking about travel ball is an industry, and that's part of the process. So it's like, how do we navigate? And it's not saying that one is right and one is wrong. I never say that. It's like this is how we get better.
You find balance between the two, right?
Exactly. Sure. So that's kind of like how I see things, and I feel like, especially in Canada, like. You coached with me back in 2011, 2012, 2013, right? And we were a country that always competed. Like we were at the World Championships, top 6 country, I would say, in the world, usually fighting for a medal. And especially on the Pan Am side, when we have, because it's not easy qualifying for a World Championship.
Panama and Colombia and all these, Cuba. It's no joke.
Venezuela, right? Puerto Rico, Mexico, Canada, U.S. You got to finish top 4, right? So it's never easy, right? So when I was coaching with you, I remember we were always competing, and that was the principle I always seen, was that
I think it was competing, Joe, but it was like representing Canada.
The jersey. It was an honor. It was always, and I don't think necessarily, my point is that changed. I think I see it in the kids when they get to put on the uniform now. It's the same thing. But I do think there's so many other outlets for them. Right. Like they're being pulled in 1,000 different directions, where it's not maybe as sexy as it once was. That. Right. And how we get back to that point, I think, is important. Because you're absolutely right, because there is a rich history and legacy that we're trying to continue on and instill in the next generation of Canadians, because who else is going to do that, right? So it's tough to kind of be a part and navigate through which is the right way, or how do we go to get there, or at least, right? So that's kind of
We had some good players that time frame, though, eh?
Yeah. Jeez.
That was a fun time. We placed second twice, back-to-back years. Did we not?
Back-to-back years. That's I don't know if you remember, we were in Colombia. I tell this story all this time. Like we're on the brink of elimination. Like I think I want to say we lost like 2-1 to Mexico, and it put us in a really tough situation.
We had to play Colombia, didn't we, to win?
We had to play Colombia in Colombia.
Yeah.
We're in Cartagena.
10,000.
Oh yeah, just screaming. And the crazy thing is,
that was a game that Dustin Houle ran the catcher.
yes,
Yeah.
he signed for big bucks too, right?
Alfora, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
Alfaro? Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember when we were in Colombia, we were scouting, and it was me, you, Hammy, and Rietsma. I don't know if you remember, but we were in a rush because we just got done workout. We wanted to go watch the U.S.-Colombia game. And we went to the Burger King, grabbed some burgers. I remember Hammy never seen him like eat Burger King, but we hopped into this taxi. And oh yeah, it was.
I thought my life was ending that night.
It was crazy.
Yeah,
and
sure.
we pull up to the yard, and
Police officers, semi-automatics, like people
everywhere.
Yeah.
Thousands of people just
My
cruising
first
down the street.
international experience. I don't know about you, but that was my first international experience, and that was
As a coach,
Yeah,
that was my
yeah,
first
yeah,
international
yeah.
experience, and there were thousands and thousands of people roaming around. I don't know if you remember, but like obviously we stuck out, like
a sore thumb.
like it's not obvious,
Yeah,
but like
sure. Yeah.
we stuck out, and all I remember is hey you, and I'm just like looking at you, Reeds. I'm like, I hope he's not
Talking to me.
talking to me because I'm a little worried here, right? He's like, hey you, and it's this Colombian guy just pointing at me. It wasn't pointing at you guys. I was just like trying to point at you guys,
Yeah.
saying, you guys want him? He comes up to me. He goes, you know me? I'm like, dude, I don't know you. I'm in Colombia. It's like, I'm from Canada.
Yeah.
But it happened to be,
This is coming back to me now. It was a former player.
it was my former teammate,
That's what it was. Yeah.
Ishmael Castro.
That's right.
So he had a phenomenal career. He played in Colombia too. He was a teammate with me in Seattle in the minors. And here we are in Colombia. And I'm already nervous because we don't know what to expect. But there are so many stories like that where, you know, it was just an amazing time. And then we went off to an island, I remember. and
Bernie.
we thought we were going to get killed. Because the guys with machetes came out, you know.
They were the nicest people in the world, though.
Nicest
They took
people
care
in
of
the
us.
world.
Yeah. Good food that day.
But
too.
yeah, all these stories just, that
That was a good team, that U.S. team. That was
They
Almora
had
and Addison Russell, Joey
Addison
Gallo.
Russell, yeah, Joey Gallo.
Yeah. That was a fun team to.
Well, we got crushed,
Yeah,
I
we
think,
hit the
that gold
finals,
medal, gold medal game. But we secured a silver medal.
Yeah.
But yeah, we ended up, that was my first international trip as a coach. Ended up with the silver medal, qualified for the World Championships in Korea,
Which was another experience.
which was a crazy experience.
Ohtani for the first time. Had I known, I
That's
probably would have taken
right.
a few more videos and pictures and maybe introduced myself. But
Yeah, we've been talking about that because obviously Haji was
Sure.
was a
Yeah.
guest, and then we had Owen Spivak do a little segment on his at bat as well. But yeah, people don't realize that whole tournament was wild because, and we talked about this last week. We couldn't win a single game in
No,
Italy.
that was the worst trip I think of all 4 years that we
Yeah.
had. Right,
Yeah.
like I still remember the conversation that Greg had with the players that week going into Korea there. But yeah, no, we figured it out.
Yeah.
Did what we had to do. Still remember beating the U.S. Kellogg that game.
1-0.
I just remember the staff just jumping in the dugout after that game, just pure excitement, right? Because that doesn't happen very often, right? But seeing Hammy in that element, it was completely.
I still remember that
Yeah.
0-0
Yeah.
ball game.
Yeah.
It was in the 7th. We go to extra innings, and our defense is setting up.
Yeah.
And normally Hammy's like on top of it. He's like, yeah, we're going to do this.
Sure.
They're bunting because it's the extra innings rule.
Yeah.
Hammy's like, should we crash? Should we not? And I'm like, I don't know. Like,
this is your decision.
yeah, it's like the guy's about to deliver a pitch. We have to tell our players.
Yeah.
And we ended up crashing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, but they pulled back and slashed, right, on us. But it was a foul ball.
Because they botched it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, they were supposed to bunt it, but then we crashed. We ended up crashing. They slashed it, foul ball. They did that twice. Next pitch, ground ball, double play. We got out of that inning from that, but we had no clue.
No chance.
What to do.
How did
it
we
was
score?
A coin flip.
It was 0-0. We scored the bottom half? I'm trying to remember what happened.
D'Souza hit a base hit in the sixth hole, and I believe it scored Robson.
I forgot about D'Souza. Another name.
Nate D'Souza.
Yeah, he could hit.
Yeah. So those are crazy. There's so many different stories, but I wanted to kind of touch upon the development and our experiences with Baseball Canada, and then lastly end off with kind of like what's kind of your future looking like in baseball? Any goals, ambitions that you personally have, or are you like what's the plan?
I mean, I'm always looking to do different things. I'm pretty content with where I am, and obviously there's been a lot of change at OBJ since I've been here the past 4 years between ownership and new building and COVID. So I feel like we're just getting settled, as crazy as that might sound, because there's been a lot of change over the past 4 years. For me, I still have aspirations to do other things. Like, I've entertained the pro side, but that's just not for me. Amateur baseball is where I want to be. Obviously, Baseball Canada, or I look at even the Blue Jays Academy, that type of stuff.
Right.
That's of interest to me. I want my impact to be across the country, not just one small pocket, right? So if I ever have that opportunity, for sure, that's something that I definitely would entertain doing. But with that said, the wife has to say yes to that as well, right? That's the only reason why we moved across the country, right, during that time. So, I'm always looking. I'm not. I'm comfortable. I'm content, right? Like, I still feel as though there's stuff that I want to do inside OBJ and make sure that is first and foremost, and then kind of take it from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. And to close this off, like, for me, I love your journey, because I think we need more players with experience that left the game of baseball, but they don't realize the future impact they could potentially have, because a lot of people do deal with injury where maybe college ball is the last stop for them, and maybe pro ball is the last stop for them. And then they get this bitterness built up. And I'm the same way. When I was done professional baseball, I was kind of like, I'm done with baseball. I don't really want anything to do with baseball. Kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But you realize, looking back, I look at a story like yours where, you ran into injuries, you got to experience college baseball, and then you went through a different route. You're super young as a coach. Baseball brought you in a totally different direction where you could make impacts on the game for years to come, right? Because of the decision you made, where it wasn't the end of the road.
For sure.
And for me, we don't have enough of those because a lot of people that end up leaving the game, they end up leaving it for good. And those are the people, in my opinion, we need.
For sure. No, I think if I could offer any advice to a young coach, like, I've built my career around trust and relationships. As crazy as that sounds, like, I joke with people all the time. I don't have a World Series ring because of my playing career. At a young age, I just kept showing up until people had no choice to know who I was as a young coach. I threw my name in a lot of different opportunities, and just put your head down and go to work, really, right? But looking back, like, everything that I did led to something else because of the people that I was around. Don't burn a bridge, and
you learn that really quickly.
Yeah, you learn that in a hurry, for sure. So that's, like I said, if there's any advice I can give a young coach that wants to go down this realm of work, just put your nose down and head down, and just be good to people.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I love that. No, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me. I think, like I said, for me, the reason why I have these conversations is because I feel like, especially on the Canadian side of things, there's a lot of good baseball people out there, but they're not they don't put social media as their favorite things to do. Yeah. So they don't put themselves out there in terms of the knowledge and resources that they have that they could maybe potentially impact other people's lives. So I appreciate you coming and speaking with me.
Appreciate you having me, Joe.